since the pandemic, many foreign people have left Nanjing or China.
Yeah.
I mean, is there basically because of some economic issues, or are there anything that needs to be improved in the city?
Well, I mean, there's always ways to make things better. I don't think there's anything specific that Nanjing's doing differently or better or worse than anywhere else. I think just simply during the pandemic, lots of people left, and so a lot of the enjoyable aspects of living in China for non-native Chinese people, as in foreigners, didn't exist so much. Foreigners sort of were like, oh, well, it's, a lot of the reasons why I was here, for example, being able to travel around Asia, Southeast Asia and, go to different countries is not possible now. And so because of that, a lot of them decided, well, I'll just go back home. And then, of course, because China's policy was much more cautious and careful about trying to contain the virus for much longer. Many other countries had sort of given up trying before that. So they thought, okay, great, I'll just go back home, maybe get sick and then be able to live normally. Whereas here I have to, still go and get tested and so on and so forth. And I think now that we've had nearly 2 years of those policies lifted, I think we will start to see people coming back and, a massive increase in expat communities.
Yeah, that's hopefully that's going to happen. So, what are some challenges that's happening on you?
Challenges for living in China?
Yeah.
I think the number one thing is, even though I've got a wife, even though I've had 11 years experience, still sometimes I feel concerned that I might be saying something that's indelicate, that's not quite correct to be said, particularly around family members and, do we talk about money or do we not talk about money? How do we talk about money? And, or, what can I ask you about your father's health, or, these types of things. Some sort of social etiquette things where I'm a little cautious about. So that's a big concern. The second one, which still exists today, is an inability to read Chinese. So when I can't read Chinese, it can be really difficult. Even using a phone to sort of try to translate, the translation into English is also it makes no sense at all, right? So if my wife's there, great, I can ask her, hey, what does this mean? But if I'm by myself, for example, going traveling, if she's working and I go traveling somewhere and it's maybe not a similarly international city with enough English speaking people, everything will be in Chinese and it will be very difficult to read where am I going, what am I doing, even what am I eating. Early days of traveling China was very interesting because in menus there's pictures, so that's great, I can choose the thing on the picture. Yeah. But if there's no pictures, it's this, I have this, and then it turns out to be something uncooked chicken feet or something, and it's oh, okay, that's surprising.
Yeah, so what are some other things that surprise you that you don't know before you come to China?
Oh, before the first time I came to China, almost anything. I mean, really, I didn't know anything at all. 2008 was the first time I came to China. I was only 19 years old, and at that time I basically heard there's a huge wall in China. There's a very famous person called Confucius who made some, a few of the most famous facts, but really I didn't know what to expect at all. I didn't have any understanding. So that's why it was very interesting and exciting for me, because I'm the sort of person that really enjoys those kind of wow, what is this? Something completely new, something completely different. And so, yeah, I suppose it's still a process of learning. Still now, having lived here 11 years, it's still a process of learning new things. Every so often I'm oh yeah, that makes sense, learn a new thing. I think you could spend an entire lifetime living in China, learning about China, and still be learning new things and finding out new things.
Learning is very important because there's a very biased concept that foreigners are taking advantage, they're enjoying the privilege among many like Chinese people. So as yourself, do you feel like you're enjoying the privilege?
I think I actually am privileged, but I think that that's because of my personal situation, my education background, and so on. But that would be applicable to anybody who has something similar to what I have. So it's not necessarily just because I'm a foreigner. I think in the past, definitely in the past, there was that situation. There was a situation where not any, but many foreigners could come to China and Chinese people wouldn't really know that they're not the type of person that is anything special, right? And yet treat them like an honored guest or, something important. I think a lot of the time as well, for some places in the past, it used to be because nobody had had any experience of what foreigners are like. So, in places that are remote, like for example, I said the first time I was in China was in 2008. I was a teacher there and I taught in a small village in Hainan Island. And basically nobody in that village had ever seen a non-Chinese person before. Yeah. And so me walking around the village, every single person was just extremely shocked and surprised to see me. And so because of that, people wanted to experience something new. They were like, hey, there's something I don't understand over there. It's a person, obviously. Let's do something. Let's see what I can do. And the Chinese natural generosity comes out like, oh, let me buy you dinner, or let me do this for you. And I think that that's what stemmed that initial treat foreigners with some higher respect. And it can be seen to be giving them privilege. But I don't think that that's the case so much anymore. I imagine there's probably still similar in some more remote parts of China, maybe where foreigners don't have that much access, but certainly Shanghai, Nanjing, Beijing, nobody's interested, nobody cares anymore, right? So a foreigner living here is not treated any differently to a Chinese person most of the time.
So during your social life, would you prefer to join a local group, or would you prefer to form or join a foreign social group?
Yes, I understand what you're saying. There is an instant way to connect with somebody who is also not living in their home country. That makes sense to me. And there is an element of that. So that makes it seem like there's this situation of us and them, right? The Chinese versus the non-Chinese, but that's not the situation. The situation is simply, I am not in my homeland, and there's another person who is not in their homeland. We can share the experiences of the journey. What is it like to not understand how to read a menu, for example, or how do you get past this problem, right? So those things do unite non-Chinese, expats in a certain way. But I wouldn't say that I prefer to hang out with foreigners or prefer to hang out with Chinese. I get a lot of joy from both of those ways of socializing. And even amongst that, it's difficult for me to say only Chinese or only non-Chinese, because there's within both of those, there's different settings, right? There's Chinese people who we're doing the same activity together. Great, that's fun. We're all trying to do this. Then there's a Chinese group where we work together. Then there's a Chinese group that's related to family and so on, or wife's friends and so on. And that's another thing. And then with foreigners, it's again, just because we're foreigners, just because we're living in a different country, then we're engaging in the same activity or sports or whatever. So it depends. I don't think there's a way to say I would prefer Chinese friends or non-Chinese friends. It's not applicable really.
Yeah, that's a new concept to me.
Yeah.
So, final question is that have you ever felt the homesickness, or do you miss the old friends in maybe Britain?
Sure. I mean, I have done a few times here and there, yeah. You get this sort of feeling of not understanding the way things are and sort of thinking, well, why am I doing this? Things are different to how I'm used to. I don't know what I should be doing. I need to go back to where it makes sense. I need to continue with the things that I was doing before. And then for me, it passes pretty quickly. I mean, I don't have it that much anymore, but I definitely remember feeling it years ago. But it can be a difficult feeling. And for some people, it's overwhelming. And I think the way to get through that feeling, for most people, it's about socializing. It's about being with people, whether it's with supportive local people who are helping you like figure out those problems that you don't understand, or it's being with other expats who have been through that process before and know what to do and help you guide you through it. In the early days, it was a lot of that came out of not understanding what I was doing, and so I would have help from local Chinese people, help me to start a bank account, for example. I had friends from an American friend who'd been here for 4 years already, and he sort of guided me, okay, here's where you can go to get this food, here's where you can, get your visa application, this is what you need, and so on. And so, I think it's just about finding support, finding different types of support and spreading, socializing. Without that, homesickness will become very overwhelming, and you'll probably just want to hide in your bedroom until it's over, right? And that's what a lot of people do. I've met foreigners in the airport, like when I was in 2008, I'd had a great time. I'd really enjoyed myself. I'd made loads and loads of friends, Chinese friends, expat friends. And in the airport, when I was leaving, I met a foreigner. I can't remember where she was from, such a long time ago, but she had her big baggage, so she was obviously leaving permanently. And she said she'd had a horrible time. She couldn't understand anything. She'd never been able to talk to anyone. And she'd been there for like a month, and she'd never made any progress. She hadn't been able to speak Chinese. Nobody really spoke any English. She didn't meet anybody. And so the whole time had just been suffering and, unable to do anything. Yeah. So she was leaving because it was too much. So I've always thought sharing the load of difficulty makes things simple. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, great.
Hope it won't take up too much.
Absolutely, no problem. Thanks, Ken. Hope it goes well.